Yeah. So just wanted to share a little bit about how this will work today. So we have two guest speakers. We're very grateful to have you with us here today. They will each be speaking for about 20 minutes to share their project. We'll have time for a very short Q&A afterwards. And a lot of us can hang out. Those of us from the NEBP team can hang out for a little bit after the end of the hour. So if you do have additional questions that didn't get answered and would like to share those, we will forward those on to our speakers. Both of our guest speakers have other talks to go to right after this. So definitely, if you don't get a chance to interact with them and ask a question, be sure to share that with us in the chat or later on, and we will pass it on. I did want to share that we'll be doing some very short breakout rooms at the end of the hour. These will be short. They won't be anything embarrassing. They'll actually be a very nice chance for you to meet a few people from around the project from all over the country. Marissa, do you want to give us a quick shout out of what organizations or zip codes you're seeing here in the chat?
It looks like we have some from Alaska. We have Casper College, we have Florida, Missouri, all over.
Awesome. Well, welcome
Virginia.
everybody. If you're just arriving, we're asking everybody to write the name of your organization and your zip code in the chat, and we are recording today's presentation. So I'm going to stop screen sharing here, and we will get started. All righty. Well, the first thing I want to do is a very quick poll, just so we can learn a little bit more about you and where you're coming from. I'm going to open the poll here, and we'll find out what type of team you are. So here we go. We'll give that just about 30 seconds or so you can tell us, are you an atmospheric science team? Are you an engineering team? Are you both? Or are you neither? All right, looks like our answers are slowing down. I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's see what we have. Got a couple last responses filtering in. And we need some Jeopardy music for this. All right, here we go. Let's see what we've got. Marissa, can you see those results for us? Maybe announce what kind of teams we have in the room with us?
It looks like engineering has the most amount of people, 64%. Followed closely, maybe not closely, atmospheric science, 29%. And then we did have 7% with no answer. Welcome, everybody.
All right, cool. Well, again, for those of you who came in late, I'm Susie Taylor. I'm at Montana State University, part of the NEBP education team. Our co-host is Dr. Marissa Sad. She's with OSTEM Evaluation, and we have two guest speakers today. I did want to acknowledge, I appreciate that a few people shared some questions when you registered, and just wanted to let you know what those questions were. I'm not sure we'll be able to get to everything today, but I know one person had asked about internships and career opportunities at NASA. Certainly, if our speakers have any information about that, we'd love to hear it. But we were actually planning to do a special 1-hour presentation specifically about careers and internships at NASA. So that will be great. Dr. Winter, I know somebody was specifically asking about the placement of the audio recorder during the eclipse. So hopefully you can address that. Someone had asked about the actual data and images that will be gathered during each of the eclipses. That is a question we might answer as a whole group later on, so everybody can hear about that. And then somebody had asked about best practices for when we're actually viewing the eclipse. And again, I think we'll share that with the whole team all across the country beyond the scope of the speaker series, just so we can get rolling. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Trae Winter. He is the co-founder and chief scientist of ARISA Lab, and will share with us about Eclipse Soundscapes.
I will attempt to share with you the Eclipse
Right.
Soundscapes. I've had lots of technical issues today.
Perfect.
Can everybody see that?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay.
And I will say too, if folks have any questions throughout that you'd like to put in the chat, we'll try to hang on to those so we can share those with you, Dr. Winter, at the end of the presentation.
Okay. And yes, so my official name is Dr. Henry de Griffin Reed Winter III, but nobody calls me that. Everybody just calls me Trae. And I was asked to tell a little bit about myself as a starting point for this. So I grew up in the South, spent most of my life in Memphis, Tennessee, where I was born, but also lived in several rural areas in Mississippi, the proper word is economically disadvantaged, but I grew up in very poor areas of the South. And as such, I never thought that a career in something like physics was something I could do. It's kind of hard to go from helping your father or help your grandfather baling hay and tarring barn roofs in Mississippi and think that one day you'll be a NASA scientist doing things like that. But it was something I really wanted to do. I always wanted to do science. And oh, maybe that's right. There we go. And I don't know why. If there was something in my personality that maybe made me want to go into the sciences. I mean, I don't really think of myself as a nerd, but for some reason, almost everybody else does think of me as a nerd. And it was actually my love of things like science fiction. And when I was growing up in Mississippi, I would spend a lot of time in the library reading books by Isaac Asimov and stuff like that. And that got me really, really wanting to be a career scientist. And I got my lucky break actually at Montana State University, where I was, after getting an undergraduate in both psychology and in physics, I was given an opportunity to actually work on a NASA spacecraft called Trace. And you can see an image of the Trace spacecraft on this graph, or on this slide. And I got to have my doctoral work paid for by flying a NASA spacecraft, essentially, at Montana State University. And just so you have an idea of how much that meant to me, there's also a picture of my dog in Montana, and his name was Chewbacca. So going by the other images I showed and the fact that I had a dog named Chewbacca before I got in there, before I was able to fly spacecraft, I think I got as close to Han Solo as anybody on Earth. And that made me very, very pleased with myself. But the other thing to get from this, though, is that don't let anybody tell you no. I mean, you can come from any different background and actually do science. And that's one of the reasons why science means so much to me, is that science works the same way for everybody. And anyone can do science if you just put the time and effort into it. So once I left Montana State University, I ended up going to the Center for Astrophysics, and my specialty was studying the sun and using computers to model different things on the sun. So I worked with computers a lot. And since I worked with computers a lot, I knew how to make them do things that other people didn't know how to make them to do. And I was able to do things like make video wall installations very, very inexpensively. First, I did this for a science display in our operations center, but a couple of Smithsonian officials saw the operations display I made and then found out what price I made it for, which was an order of magnitude less than what commercial people were asking to do it. And I got to be known more for creating video walls. I kind of paused the science. I thought this was something I was just going to do for a little while. But this is an image from the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian National Design Museum. And there's an art piece in front of it. This is part of their tools exhibition. And so there's an art piece of tools, and behind it is the video wall that I built for them. This is a video wall I built for the Harvard Art Museums, and I gave several talks in front of that wall, talking about the sun, talking about my research that I was doing. And this is actually probably one of my favorite images of all, because this was the opening day of an exhibit I built at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. And that place is kind of a mecca for me, right? And for all nerds, it's an amazing place. And I built my own exhibit there. And as soon as we unveiled it and turned it on, this young girl, right about 8th grade level, said, "That is so cool. and instantly pulled out her cell phone and started taking pictures of it. And if you know anything about science education, being able to inspire and grab the attention of young women at that age is the holy grail. And it just, filled me with a lot of joy. And I kind of never really went back to serious research after that. I kept on using my science knowledge to solve different problems, like how to make video walls cheaper. And then I realized that with all of the exhibits I was doing, none of them were accessible to people who were blind or had low vision. And that was actually a huge issue. I knew several people who were blind. I had a colleague at the Center for Astrophysics who was an astronomer who went blind later in life. And during the 2017 eclipse, I convinced NASA that we could actually make eclipses accessible to people who are blind or had low vision. And I had an idea, and that idea didn't work, so I did something else. And that was 2017. And now in 2023, with more time to think about it and more time to do it, I was able to do that original vision, which is called the Eclipse Soundscapes project. And the science question, right, for Eclipse Soundscape, because we are a NASA-sponsored project, we have to do science, is how does life on Earth, specifically wildlife, respond to solar eclipses? And we are using citizen science. We call it participant science or participatory science, but we're trying to engage the public in helping career scientists study this question. So we are working to study both the annular eclipse that's happening in just a few weeks, which is why I might seem a little stressed and panicked. And that's happening on October 14th, and it cuts a swath. The path of the eclipse cuts a swath from Oregon all the way down to Texas. And then we're using that as kind of a run up for the big experiment, which will be from Oregon and then goes down through South Carolina. And all of this is going to recreate a study, or part of it's going to recreate a study that happened almost 100 years ago. Back in August 31st of 1932, there was an eclipse in the US in the Boston area. And a scientist named Wheeler just put out ads in the newspaper asking for the general public to send in their observations of how things changed during the eclipse, how animals changed their behavior, what they felt, what they heard, what they saw, what they experienced. And he got hundreds of these entries and published them in a scientific paper. And this, I think, is the first published example of a citizen science project, although I'm not sure, I wouldn't swear to it. And we're using this as a model of how you can actually get information and experience eclipse, not just with your eyes, but with your other senses, such as the sounds changing because animals think it's now nighttime, or the temperature changes that happen during an eclipse. And as we were designing this, we didn't want to make a project for people who are blind and low vision. We wanted to make a project where we made it with people who are blind and low vision so that they could actually do the science alongside their sighted peers on an equal basis. And we use something called universal design of learning, where you think of all the different ways you can share information, and not just for people who are blind, but people who may have other needs, so that it's not something for one group of people, but the information you need to participate is there in multiple forms, so that hopefully the form that best makes sense for you is there. And the other thing that we found, and this has been known for a while in the accessibility community, is that when you use that kind of universal design process, it makes the experience better for everybody, not just a community that's traditionally underserved. It makes things nicer for everybody to use. And again, not only are we observing the August 31st, 1932 study that was published in 1935, but also too, even though I didn't get this Eclipse Soundscape Citizen Science Project to work for the 2017 eclipse, I did work with the National Park Service, and they did a bunch of recordings in national parks during the eclipse to see how the wildlife in national parks changed their behavior, and measuring that change in behavior by measuring the changes in sounds that they make. And we're using that as our test data to actually calibrate our instruments, to know how we're going to do the data analysis, and to know what we may or may not be able to expect during the eclipse. Now, part of the whole occlusion aspect is that not everybody might be able to do everything. And so in order to address this, we have several different ways that people can participate. Some are online only, and you can do them at any time. Some you do actually on the day of the eclipse, and then some others actually require some equipment in order to do. So there are all these different roles. All of these roles are explained on our YouTube channel. We have an Eclipse Soundscapes playlist at the ARISA Lab YouTube channel. And all of the videos that we produce are not only visual in nature, but they're also self-described, so that if you just listen to it, you should be able to get the same information as if you listened and watched it. And also, too, everything has closed captioning as well. So again, this goes into the same information, multiple modes, multiple forms. The apprentice role is just learning about eclipses. You can do that free online. And we now have a bunch of lesson plans for educators that are made by actually in-class educators. So you can either just learn and watch the videos, or you can actually go through, and if you teach a class, you can get the materials and bring your class through the whole process of learning more about eclipses, why there are different types, why they don't happen every month, all those things. The observer role is something that anybody can do at any location during the eclipse. And this is the direct tie to that Wheeler study back in the 1930s. And we are asking people to just have a multi-sensory eclipse experience and journal their experiences. We give you some questions that we'd like to answer during the eclipse, before the eclipse, and after the eclipse. And just tell us what you experienced using an online form, as simple as that. The other thing which we are asking people to do are the data collector role. And this is important for people who are doing the National Eclipse Ballooning Project, because each team will get one of our data collector kits, and we'll be asking you to put out an audio moth data collector, which is a little device about the size of 3 AA batteries that is a science grade audio data recorder. And where the observer role gives us qualitative data, right? Data that's hard to put into numbers about the eclipse. The data collector role will actually give us hard quantitative data about the changes in animal sounds and other sounds in different ecosystems during the eclipse, so that we can actually accurately measure if there are changes, where those changes occurred, what frequency ranges they occurred. Lastly, we will have a data analyst role. That's not coming until 2024, because we really need to think about how to make all these tools accessible. And we've got a couple of prototypes that we're working on, but that will be people actually working with the data, listening to the data, and identifying all the different parts of the data. What did you hear in it? Did you hear changes? And all that metadata, information about the data set, information about the recordings, will help this group of scientists called Soundscapes Ecologists find the data that they need to be able to better study different regions and the animals and the habitats that they're interested in. So just quickly about the, I could talk about all these roles, but I'm just going to talk about the data collector one a little bit. So data collector, as I said, revolves around this audio moth. And we'll be asking everybody to, everybody in the National Ballooning Project, each team gets one of these, and we will be asking everyone to actually set one of these out at least the day before the eclipse, hopefully. If you can set it out 2 days before the eclipse, that would be great. But we need some baseline data to be able to measure against to see if there's a change. If you actually just scan on the QR code that's in the slide, you can find out more information about the data collector role and all the different things that you need to do. But I'm actually going to see if I can switch gears and share that web page real quick. Can't believe this is actually working. So if you go to our web page, You can go through and find out more about the project, find out how you can participate, sign up for updates, and lots of different resources. But if you go to the observer role, this will actually take you step by step on what should arrive when you get one of your kits. And the kit is pretty simple. It's the AudioMoth data recorder, a very technical dry bag instrument protector, also known as a Ziploc bag, zip tie so that you can affix the AudioMoth inside the Ziploc bag to a tree, to a post, some secure location, and then a padded return envelope, 3 AAA batteries to power the AudioMoth, and inside the AudioMoth is a 64 gigabyte micro SD card. And I don't really have time to go through all the different instructions, but this just goes step by step to how to find out more about your AudioMoth. It takes you through a tour that explains how we try to make the AudioMoth accessible by adding these elements called bump dots, which are of different shapes and sizes. So you can know where things like the switch is. If you can't read the labels and you can't see that teeny tiny switch, you can actually just feel your way around to the rounded bump dot and know where the switch is that you'll have to manipulate in order to set the time and then start the data collection. So again, this should be pretty easy on the website. If you do have any trouble with the data collection, do please ask me. I will put my email address in the chat, and you can reach out to me directly, or you can reach out to our team. There's several links on the webpage about how you can contact our team. And the cool thing about this project is that we're trying to leave value in place. We're working with lots of libraries and different community groups. And after they take their recordings and they're finished the project major, the main part of the project, all we ask them to do is to remove that data card after they've done their collections, and then put this data card in the envelope that we provided and pop it in the mail. It's all already stamped and addressed and ready to go. And they get to keep the AudioMoth data recorder. And what we're really hoping, especially for libraries, is that they will use these for their own science experiments later on. The SD cards are very cheap now. The 64 gigabyte ones cost about $10. And libraries are now having something called a library of things, where instead of just lending out books, they lend out scientific equipment and tools and other things. So we're hoping that by leaving these in these different groups, the science will continue on. And after you participate in this, we will be providing a lot of links and information about other projects that use sound to study the natural world around us, and where you can use your AudioMoth to actually participate in those citizen science projects as well. So that's the presentation I had prepared, and I will stop sharing my screen now. And if we have time, I did not start my timer, unfortunately. So if we have any time left, I will answer any questions.
Thanks, Trae. That was great. I think what we'll do is have people put any questions they may have in the chat, because I know you need to get going, and I know our
I have more
second
time than I
speaker.
thought, so I can stick around for a little
Okay,
bit after this.
awesome. Well, let's see if anybody has a question. You can go ahead and post that in the chat, maybe just for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll need to move on to our second speaker. We can also capture any of the questions that people have and reconnect with you, Trae. So we can post these on our website, or even do a follow-up video or anything like that.
Yeah. So I will say that if I could answer just a couple of questions in chat. One, yeah. The kits have been sent out to the National Eclipse ballooning team, and so ask them about the time frame to sending them to all of your host institutions. And the other thing, oh, and I just see that Marissa already is ahead of me, and they were mailed out this week. The other thing, there was a question that you said earlier about placing the AudioMoths. One of the powers of citizen science is people do things that you won't expect. So what we're trying to do is not oversubscribe the experiment. We are letting people decide where to put their own AudioMoths, where to place them. And we just ask that it might be in a place where you might expect to hear animal sounds like insects, crickets, or something else. But that's also not a requirement. You just have to let us know where you put it and kind of what type of environment you put it in, because all of this data is usable for us.
Great. Marissa, maybe I'll turn it over to you. Do we have any other chat questions that I'm missing here?
I was typing a little bit, so I might have missed this, but did we address Paul's question of can they send the recorders to the host institution? Maybe send them out ahead of time?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. I thought the question was the host institution being the institution that's hosting the ballooning team, and therefore they're already being sent out. As far as at the sites where you're going to leave them,
Right.
that's the question I can't answer.
Yeah, so we're going to Utah. We're from Wyoming, but we're going to Utah. Could I send them to Snow College in Utah so that you get them out? Because we won't be there till the day before the eclipse. I guess I'm gotta clarify. So if I sent them to the guy at Snow College, he could send them out 2 or 3 days ahead of time before we get there. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, that's fine. Just have them go through the instructions on how to set them up, and you can still register the audio moth with your name and contact information, because that's more of what we'll need than the name of who actually set it up. But yeah, just have them go to the web page, go through all the steps. There's a little form where you enter your audio moth number, which is printed and in braille and scannable on all the audio moths in the boxes that they go in, and that will just register its latitude and longitude and what type of habitat it's in. So yes, that is completely fine as far as I'm concerned. You have to talk with your colleagues to see if they want to go out in the woods and actually put a piece of electronics in a plastic bag and stick it on a tree.
All right, well, thanks, Trae. That was really great. I would say if you have any more questions for Trae and want to put them in the chat, we'll definitely get them to you. We can share with all the teams and post on the website as well. Just in the interest of time, we're going to move on to our next speaker, Kristen Weaver. And Kristen is the Deputy Coordinator and Lead Outreach Coordinator for Globe Observer. That's a program of the Earth Sciences Division of NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. And Kristen, if I got any of that wrong, feel free to correct me, and we will turn it over to you.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. So yeah, so I help run the Globe Observer Citizen Science app. So it's the app of the Globe program, which is a much larger entity that has a lot more to it, but the app is kind of the piece of it that I work on. And then I'm also leading some of our Eclipse activities. So, and I am based at Goddard Space Flight Center, which is in Greenbelt, Maryland. And you can see out there, there's our Eclipse, one of our Eclipse poster that was actually created for 2017, but it's still really pretty. So you can, if you you're welcome to print that out if you want to. It's on our website, but it's just a nice image. And let's see. So a little bit about me. So I think there are actually some similarities I noticed to what Trae was talking about. So I was born and raised in Colorado. Sorry, I accidentally hit my hot thing to close out my window. Anyway, so I am from Greeley, Colorado, which is halfway between Denver and the Wyoming border. So not the mountainous part of Colorado that most people think of when they think Colorado, but very proudly a Coloradan, although I've been out in Maryland now since 2007, so that makes it about 16 years now. But so I actually studied computer science and psychology as an undergrad. I started out in computer science and was starting to get frustrated with computer science, and so added psychology, and then ended up realizing I was doing some tutoring of some elementary school students, and realized I was having way more fun tutoring them after school than I was writing computer code in the computer lab. So I ended up getting a teacher's certificate and then a master's in curriculum and instruction, and I taught 2 years in Denver public schools before I moved out to and taught in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I taught there for 6 years. And then also somewhat similar to Trae as well, I had the opportunity to start working for the Global Precipitation Measurement Mission. A colleague who had been my former department chair was working at Goddard on that mission, and that actually on my hat there, that's a paper model. One of the fun things I got to do was help create that paper model of the satellite. That most of them are smaller sized. I made that bigger one specifically for that was for an Odyssey of the Mind event. But so I went from teaching into more science communication and outreach, and that's what I'm doing now, starting out with the Global Precipitation Measurement Mission, and then with the Globe Observer project. So I think though, I'm never sorry that I got the computer science degree, even though I was never a programmer. I think it's useful skills and a useful way of thinking about things. And then in terms of the things that I was a big Star Trek fan as well as Star Wars. And so the reason I like this picture in the upper right is because that's me and my husband in our Star Trek uniforms in a model of the Millennium Falcon from a convention we went to. So yes, I realize it's a little bit but I just think the juxtaposition is fun. And then the other thing I have there is as Legos. I've always loved Legos, and so I get to use Legos for work occasionally. So that is actually a Lego model based on GPM precipitation data made out of Lego that was one of my more successful like tabling outreach events. And then when I started working with Globe, I was like, I need to use more Legos. And so that's a diorama of people using the Globe Observer Citizen Science app to take observations is in the lower right there. So I think the message is that, things that I was interested in that certainly led me. I went to space camp when I was in 6th grade and definitely was always interested in that, wanted to be an astronaut. And I guess, I got as close as working at NASA. So that's not too bad, even though I may never actually get into space. And then there was the question about the internships. I would say, a lot of the NASA internships, intern.nasa.gov is the place to go to look for those. But the one piece of advice for people who are starting to look for jobs at NASA that I will tell people is most of the jobs at NASA don't actually work for NASA. Technically, my paycheck doesn't come from NASA. My paycheck comes from, I think Science Systems. Oops, I was trying to go back and it's not letting me go back. Science Systems and Applications, Inc. I actually am a contractor. I work for a contracting company that has a contract at Goddard. Most of the jobs at Goddard at 75% are contractors, not NASA civil servants. So whether it's engineering, science, outreach, and communication, what you want to do if you're looking for jobs at NASA, you need to look for the companies that have the contracts at the center you want to work at. And that's my biggest piece of advice, because I imagine some of you young folks are probably fairly close to starting to look for jobs. So just keep that in mind. And so then we will get into actually what I'm talking about today. So both Trae and I are talking about sort of the effect of the eclipse on the environment. But my project, the Global Eclipse Tool, is more talking about the atmosphere specifically, and which has some connections. I think actually the two projects kind of dovetail very well. But so while everybody else is, and I guess even the National Eclipse Ballooning Project is that I feel like most people are like, oh, this great astronomical event. And then some of us are like, oh, but Earth science. So some of the things that you can, the effects and the chance to study some of the things that happen in the atmosphere. And so we have this one pager on our website, our fabulous graphic designer. She didn't do the poster because we hadn't hired her in 2017, but did this nice diagram. And then the back talks a little bit more about some of the things you might expect to see changing during the eclipse. And then with the Globe Observer app and a thermometer, we can have people measuring some of those changes, as well as observing wind and some other things in clouds and some other things that are happening. So the basic idea is we have the Globe Observer tool. It always has 4 tools in it: clouds, mosquito habitat, land cover, and trees, and more if you're a trained observer, but everybody can see those 4. And then for the eclipse, we open up a special tool that allows people to do air temperature as well. So all you need is just a basic thermometer, which, I think all of you probably, your balloon, the equipment you're using on the balloons are much more sophisticated than anything we're asking people to get. Basic thermometer, report the air temperature, and then tell cloud observations, especially if things are changing. And so this is something that we hope while you're, waiting around in between things, take some observations with this. I know it's, much simpler than what you all are familiar with for what you're doing for this project, but we still would love to have your data. We're also asking people to sort of set the scene by taking a land cover observation. So that's taking photographs of the landscape around them. And if you want to tell us what you see, classify it, although all we need are the photos. The classification is optional. And this is one, so land cover and clouds that we're having people use for the eclipse, those are available to anybody anytime through the Globe Observer app. So you could start, you could download the app tomorrow and go take those observations. And you can see on the right there, so on the left is someone taking an observation, on the right is some photos, a map of the photos from the Globe visualization system. So where does this data go? So it is an open database that can be used by scientists and students to study the effects of the eclipse on the atmosphere. The left photo there is Dr. Brent Dodson from Langley Research Center talking about his research about some of the citizen science temperature data collected in 2017, looking at the comparison of how much did the temperature drop based on different levels of cloud cover reported. This paper is on our website in our publication section if you're interested. And actually, Brant will be, we have a webinar session next, what we call Globe Observer Connect next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And Brant will be one of the guests. I can put that link in the chat in a little bit. And then also student projects. So the pictures on the right are student projects from 2017 in North America and 2019 and 2020 in South America. So it is a science and education program, the GLOBE program. So, and then, the idea is also that data can come from everywhere, not just people who are on the path of maximum eclipse. So this is data from 2017. The pinks and reds are the highest temperatures. We got over 85,000, 86,000 air temperature measurements on one day in 2017, which is amazing. So you can see the temperatures dropping as the eclipse shadow is coming over, and then they'll start to increase again. So, and 10,000 clouds observations. We also got a bunch of clouds observations. So we're hoping, we may not match that for the annular, but certainly we're hoping to do that next April for the total. Ubiquitous safety message, because that's something that NASA always wants us to emphasize. Make sure that you're never looking at the sun without protective glasses and appropriate protective glasses, solar viewing glasses, not regular sunglasses, or some kind of filter that's an appropriate filter. Just make sure you're being careful, because the sun is never blocked completely during the annular eclipse. So just make sure you always have protection, or use indirect methods of observation. And so, pinhole cameras, something with a hole in it like a colander, some of these eclipse cards, but there's lots of ways you can look safely indirectly during the eclipse. Just, don't damage your eyes, please. So I'll go through very briefly what the app looks like, but I know that that see if there's any questions. But more detail. These slides are all, except for the one about me, are part of are on our website already. So these are available for people doing presentations to other groups. That's part of the resources we're trying to provide. So you can see there from Argentina in 2020, thermometer, solar viewing glasses, and the app all ready to go. So the app's it's pretty straightforward. It's honestly very easy. We're hoping to have it out at the end of this week in a practice mode, but it's really simple. The basic idea is you tell us what type of thermometer you're using, whatever it is, whether it's a alcohol-filled thermometer, a digital thermometer, some sort of data logger, or a portable weather station. Tell us what it is, just basically liquid-filled digital weather station. You can report in Celsius or Fahrenheit. It all goes into the database in Celsius, but we accommodate the weirdness of the United States still using Fahrenheit, so you can report it in Fahrenheit if you want to. And then it has measurement alarms so that it'll remind you to take observations. And then I already mentioned the land cover observation just to kind of set the scene. But it will detect the time of maximum eclipse at your location, and that little animation at the top actually moves closer to the sun as we go along, so it's kind of fun. And it, like I said, it gives you a reminder. 10 minutes most of the time. The half hour right around the eclipse, we have reminders every 5 minutes. And then during maximum eclipse, we say, put down the thermometer, enjoy the eclipse, and then pick it back up afterwards. But it does give you reminders, although you can do it more frequently than that if you want to. We're just reminding people so that it pops up and says, hey, take another measurement, so they don't forget to do that. But what we're hoping is people will do an hour or two before the eclipse and an hour or two after, because that's going to be what's going to give them the best graph. And here's what the data looks like. You can go in and edit it if you need to, or if you mistakenly entered something and need to delete it. So you can't edit that until you send it in. It'll remind you to do clouds observations periodically, but of course, if you see something changing suddenly, that's a great time to make a new clouds observation. And if you've got your sound recorder out there, this is also, it's great to have that data in comparison. Here's kind of what the clouds, I know I'm going quickly, but I want to make sure that there's time if there's some questions. So just this is what it asks you to record: overall cloud cover, sky conditions, some cloud types, and then take photos. And then you end up with your graph. So it updates as you go. This is kind of mocked up based on data from 2017, but you can see it has the nice graph, temperature going down and going back up again, and then also reporting the cloud cover percentage. You can share your graph. It'll also be, the data also goes into the Globe database, and you can see the graph in the app and in the My Observations afterwards. So that's kind of the basics. Observer.globe.gov/eclipse. We've got a lot more information and resources there. So activity guides, other sorts of opportunities for data collection, and then the resource library, different things that we've collected from different places. Eclipse Soundscapes is mentioned on the landing page, but I think I may go and see if there's some other things I can link from this resource library. Y también hay una sección de recursos en español. Not everything is translated, but we do have some things translated. And then if you know if you're giving presentations about Globe Eclipse, we've also got some resources, including these presentation slides, like I said, except for the one about me, because that's not usually relevant. But so, yeah, download the app, App Store, Google Play. You do have to create an account, but it's free. You can go start taking the other types of observations now, and then follow us on social media. We'll have some videos and stuff coming out that we're going to start releasing start Friday. And then the contact us form on the Observer website will get to me, as well as a few other members of the team. I think, yep, that's all I had.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. I do want to share something too while people can type any questions in the chat. I'm a huge fan of Globe Observer. I've taught it to many teachers, kids, other people. And I think for those of you who are involved in ballooning, it might be possible that you're pretty busy and there will probably be a lot of people around watching you. So Globe Observer is something that you could share with other folks who might have gathered to watch you preparing your balloon, and give them an opportunity. You know, I don't know how much you need to get people out of your way, but it would be something that you can share with other people so they can contribute right alongside you while you're getting ready to launch your balloons. So with that, I will.
And I will say, and there are opportunities, that there are ways that if you've already got a weather station or a data logger, and we'd love to have that data for the Globe database as well. And if that's something that maybe, Susie, I can share some information, like if you're already collecting that information on the ground, then I am happy to help facilitate getting that into the Globe database. Using Globe Eclipse is really the target audience is primarily people who may not are kind of a more basic level. Like I said, just getting a thermometer, wanting to do something, don't want to do all the other things that, you know, this group is I think already a little bit more sophisticated in terms of knowing the instruments that are available, how to collect data, than maybe our average target audience for this. And Susie actually does appear in a video that we had an intern do last summer. I'm going to find the link of that video, Susie, and put it in the chat too, because she talks about using Globe Observer, and it's really great. I will find that video and put it in the chat.
Oh, thanks, Kristen. No, I'm definitely a Globe Observer fan, as evidenced by the video. Marissa, will you help us with any questions that might be in the chat?
Yeah, I don't think there's any specific for Kristen.
So while we're waiting for some questions, I was going to say that one of the really nice